The law of karma is reminded here. Every action creates a result. When right or good action is done, right or good results are created. When bad or wrong action is done, something bad or wrong results. The effect of a bad result can be met by the effect of a good result, but it is not a replacement. So if a person does one or two of the list of virtues, he or she does not overcome doing also the opposite of one of the values. The meaning is that all of the virtues should be practiced to the level that one can. One will find that when one of the virtues is practiced, many others will naturally follow. To consciously practice, we can reduce the inclination to live by the untrained thinking of the mind, which will often lead one away from knowledge and feeds ignorance. Each action, of course, has its karmic response in life. The eternal truth is known as the eternal existence of the eternal self. Many would think this is not possible, and some would think that a wrong action done yesterday can be corrected by a right action today. This is not possible. Karma theory states that every action has a result. A wrong result cannot be replaced by a good result, but the effect of the wrong result can be met by the effect of a good result, not a replacement. So if a person is arrogant or egoistic towards others, but goes to a temple or donates to charity or meditates, this does not compensate for the arrogant or egoistic thoughts, words, or actions. The 20 values should be practiced to whatever extent a person can and grow steadily. When one starts with humility, they will naturally move towards the other values naturally. This takes a mindful attention to thoughts, words, and actions. For what needs to be known, Krishna says that he will share that from knowing which Arjuna will gain immortality, when it is truly understood and absorbed into himself, thus inseparable. Krishna says this is to show that the knower becomes the knowledge and thus merges with the same. So this is to be known and to be experienced. Unless someone knows their goal, inspiration will not be present to do anything. What Krishna shares is an understanding of consciousness, which has been interpreted as endowed with the spirit of no beginning, and that is Brahman. This means that the true higher self has no cause for his creation, and that is what each person is. Life is given from the one that has life to each new life. Similarly, Brahman, which is to be known, is the supreme, beginningless existence, which is neither being nor non-being. This is the core of non-duality in Advaita Vedanta. Existence, which is Sat in Sanskrit, is usually related to the quality that a thing has, which is distinct from all others. In this chapter, Krishna mentions that consciousness is not an object, not something with a quality which is distinct from all others. So it is that existence regardless of qualities. Remember here that consciousness is not the body, as it is the same regardless of age or size. It is not the mind and intellect that also change regularly. It is always the same. This existence is not defined by the absence of all two. In this sense, the higher consciousness is ever present through the waking, the dreaming, and the non-dream experience of sleeping. It is not a temporary existence. It is ever present in spite of all conditions in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Every life experience in the body, mind, and intellect is temporary. Brahman, or consciousness, is not a temporary experience, as it is always present, and this is the goal to understand, to reach eternal existence and truth. When this is understood and experienced, one experiences immortality as a self. Not knowing the nature of the immortal self, one does not gain immortality. The soul does not die, whether one knows this or not while living in a body. To experience immortality is different in a person that knows compared to one that does not know. The person who knows this truth can watch the perishing or changing nature of the body and changing thoughts and experiences of the mind. So why does this need to be known according to Krishna? When one seeks liberation or freedom, the suffering that a person experiences is through the forgetting of the eternal nature of the deathless soul. This is the same within each person and is the same as Brahman or higher consciousness. This is an experiential reality. The dream exists for the dreamer. Only after waking does one question the reality of the temporarily experienced dream. Waking seems more real than the dream because the continuity of the experience, that is from the night before to the morning of waking. The waking person understands the temporary reality of the dream in the dream state. The waking that appears real in the state of samadhi, one comes to realize that the waking state is also temporary. Waking then becomes the temporary or relative state to a person who is a realized soul. Such a person feels that even waking is temporary. This is known as Jivan Mukti. Samadhi becomes his or her nature, and waking comes and goes as a temporary reality. That then becomes the experience of true existence. It is never absent. I am awareness or consciousness is samadhi. This is neither a temporary reality nor is it non-existence. Currently, we see reality as the reality of many objects. Consciousness is everywhere. It has many eyes, ears, heads, feet. It envelopes everything and stays. Liberation is not possible when one looks at anything as the other. As soon as there is the other, there is a possibility of attachment, which then often leads to fear of loss. With fear, there is no freedom, and when there is no freedom, there is no long-term happiness. There can be temporary happiness. When a person hates another, this creates unhappiness or suffering too. If we can see that one consciousness is existing in the many eyes, heads, ears, feet, etc., and the one alone makes it seem or appear as if it is many, we can understand that the appearance of the one is in many forms. The original nature of consciousness is maintained while it appears to be variety. The example often used to understand this is if we pour water into 4 different colored glasses, it may look different in each glass, but it is still just water in each. In the same way, although there is plurality in life, the perception of it is enclosed in different forms that makes it appear as an other. We can look at our own bodies, and even though the hands are different than the feet, it is still the same person. On a larger perspective, the entire universe is filled with a variety of forms that are all pure consciousness. Remember that absolute reality or consciousness has no quality to distinguish it from something else. It allows all the senses to work, but is unattached to any of them. It allows and supports each experience, and without it, no experience would be possible. It functions without even being noticed. It does not have sattva, rajas, or tamas qualities, which work independently of each other. Yet consciousness allows our own equipment to experience the changing qualities. Consciousness is both inside ourselves and outside too. It is available in both places. This seems like a paradox, but let's look at this from our own experience. If we look at an object, we can see it because it is outside our eyes, and we can remember that we are really seeing this in our mind from the reflection of light off the object that then goes through our eyes and our nervous system to register in our brain. Similarly, when we wake from dreaming about a vacation, we understand that it felt like we were outside, but the dream happened all inside our mind. The realized being experiences the self both within the body and mind equipment as well as in each other object of existence. The body is acknowledged as a material object. When one is identified with the body, one feels inside it. not identified with the body, the self, higher self, is experienced in both living and non-living entities. This is a very subtle energy to know and to experience. Ignorance makes it feel far to understand. Knowledge allows this truth to be seen closely and clearly to the one that seeks such understanding. This experience is like someone who wakes from sleep. The experience was not experienced in sleep. In such an experience, nothing is lost, but the waking experience is rediscovered. Similarly, the experience of immortality does not make one a different person. It is just an experience of a subtle reality that seems far to a person who does not know it, yet feels very close and familiar to the one that rediscovers it. The soul gets lost in the whirlpool of samsara, of birth and death, success and failure, sorrow or happiness, pain or pleasure, etc. When the soul rediscovers its own higher self, it remembers its own absolute reality. When one does not recognize one's own higher self and gets lost in the body, mind, intellect, we seem to have lost our own higher self that is always with us, within and outside our human forms. Consciousness is the same and undifferentiated among all beings. It is divided as though there are differences. This is like dividing space in an empty home, which is divided into different rooms for different purposes. That space in the home then appears to be divided. Consciousness functions through the equipment that it expresses through, but does not possess itself in any of the qualities of the equipment that it is expressed through. Just like electricity functions through a fan as a fan, through a TV as a TV, and through a lamp as a lamp, but none of those is the electricity itself. Consciousness expresses through each of us as our own body, mind, and intellect, but the consciousness is the same. The one singular, homogeneous presence is the same within each being, which appears to be many. The world is the variety of appearances. To see this oneness, undivided at all times, even though it is the one that supports this variety, is the one to be known. It is the sustainer of the divisions. This consciousness can also dissolve this entire plurality and variety of forms into oneness of unity. Consciousness is the one that creates, supports, sustains, and recreates existence. From the position of man, on waking, we create and sustain our manifested experience and dissolve the creation that was present in our deep sleep. Here, Arjuna learns that Brahman, or consciousness, is the creator of the collective plurality seen and experienced in the world, which is then sustained and eventually dissolved. As a person, Brahman or consciousness is working through each of us doing this daily. We each have different human roles in our lives, but each role is let go to understand that who we are at the core is the higher self. In its purest form, it is unconditioned, unlimited, and eternal. Pure consciousness is existence, consciousness, and bliss. Krishna is accounting for the individuality and the plurality of the world. The knowable includes the knowledge, what is to be known, and what is to be known through the knowledge. The self is described like light, that which illumines. Light also allows us to know what is. A light does not need another light to be seen or known. Similarly, the soul or higher self is higher self aware and higher self conscious. Pure awareness is different from the mind, the eyes, and the object seen. The highest light is the light of pure awareness. It knows the light and also knows darkness and the absence of light. The nature of awareness is beyond darkness, but is aware of knowledge, and it knows ignorance too. This is what each human is. The light of awareness is in the heart of everyone. It is known through knowledge. It knows what is to be known and is itself what is to be known. It is the nature of pure, infinite existence and knowledge. Having realized the higher self, one comes to know that the higher self is the knowledge of subjective presence. We can remember here that each person has the awareness of I am in their own existence, even without any knowledge or training. The knowledge of one's existence cannot and is not denied by every living creation. Each life seeks to survive and maintain or sustain itself. Kshetra is understood to be the matter, the field. Kshetrajna is the knower of the field and is engaged in using the field for experience. What is jnanam is that clearly knowing the difference between the matter and the knower of the matter, which is the spirit. There is the knowing of the independence of Kshetrajna from the matter, and that is one and the same of all beings. The entire creation is the combination of matter and non-matter, and this knowledge releases oneself from identifying the matter as oneself. This knowing to be realized is called jnana. Now, Prakriti is very well manifested and known as Maya. This is the power by whom the entire creation becomes manifested. Power is held by the one able to manifest. Matter can manifest only when non-matter or spirit is present. Sankhyan philosophy, which were spiritual scientists, have come to the conclusion that matter has no beginning. Here, the cause of that matter which manifests the beginningless matter must also be beginningless. Both matter and spirit are then beginningless. Today, scientists say that matter always exists as potential energy in another form, if not in one. Science does not accept the presence of the non-matter of consciousness. First, they say it could be a product of matter, but consciousness and matter do not have any common characteristics. The effect must have the qualities of the cause. The second possibility they suggest is that consciousness does not exist. If this was so, how does inert matter know its own existence? The third possibility is that both have their own separate and parallel existence. Krishna says that even though both are beginningless, both are him. He says if both are independent, then the Purusha has no need to identify with or interact with Prakriti, and Prakriti does not need Purusha. But Purusha needs to express itself through Prakriti, and Prakriti needs Purusha to manifest. All changes and qualities belong to Prakriti for life. The one who resides in this body, Kshetrajna, also known as Purusha, is the one residing in a body to make each choice for an individual. The quality of thinking, which creates the basis of the choice, is when Purusha takes over. A quality in me, the gunas, is Prakriti, which has been carried by me as impressions for a long time. Remember that the reason each of us thinks or behaves in a particular way is because of our own predominant gunas. We can come to know the changes and modifications that occur in each individual, which is called Prakriti. Purusha and Prakriti are traveling together in each of our lives. We have already learned about the lower and higher natures. The lower nature, Prakriti, includes the 5 elements, the body, the mind, and the intellect. The existence of consciousness expressing through matter is called life. This is the expression of the spirit or higher self through matter. The consciousness expressing through matter is the higher Prakriti, or nature, or higher self, which is the Purusha. The whole of creation is based on cause and effect. The one that is the cause is called Prakriti. It is not a thing. Prakriti is a power which manifests as matter. Maya, or Prakriti, uses time and space to manifest. The potential is present as unmanifested and becomes manifest. This work is from Prakriti, who does this in the presence of the Purusha. Prakriti is the cause and Purusha is the effect. For whose purpose, we might ask? Who is the experiencer of the manifested? It is not for the Prakriti. The experience is for a living entity that becomes manifest. When does the cause become an effect? This is based upon time. The cause itself becomes the effect, and creating another effect requires the factor of time. The Purusha's presence allows the mind to experience the products of the Prakriti. He or she enjoys some and doesn't enjoy some. Purusha makes Prakriti's experience complete. The experience takes place in the matter called the mind. When one starts to identify as the matter through which it enjoys or doesn't enjoy, he or she has forgotten that he is the Purusha behind the experience. The Purusha, or consciousness, is only the presence behind the experience. It makes the experience possible, but it is just the power that allows experience, not the experiencer itself. The mind is the subtle form of the Prakriti. When Purusha becomes identified with matter, it is tossed around by experiences of Maya. When the consciousness becomes identified with Prakriti, it becomes imbalanced. When the mind is identified with Prakriti, then it will be the enjoyer or experiencer as it is associated with the gunas of the mind. This will create seeking for the similar enjoyment for the satisfaction of the same gunas. The soul is the Purusha. The mind and body is the Prakriti. The soul experiences the qualities of the Prakriti. In its pure essence, the soul is perfect. But as it associates with the gunas of the Prakriti, it becomes contaminated by the unique qualities or tendencies in this life and in future lives as well. The soul is the same quality in its essence as pure consciousness or the Lord or the pure self. When one understands that the impurities can be eliminated, then there can be moksha or liberation. This requires an understanding of the absolute truth as opposed to relative truth. Here we are reminded that each soul is pure and not to be thought of as anything less. If we feel that a person is a sinner, he or she will never overcome such a label. Correct the action or behavior that may be incorrect, and the self, higher self, correction is the path to union with one's truthful identification with one's higher self. In the Gita, there is no ambiguity of this idea. The pure consciousness is within each person, which is the close observer for the experience of each person. The higher and the lower consciousness is in each person. Higher consciousness is the observer, while the lower consciousness is that which experiences the dualities of life. Impressions or vasanas are gathered through days or lifetimes. The soul can become the observer of the contamination of the self, and it never interferes with any choices made by the lower self. Remember that higher consciousness is supporting every experience and also enjoys each experience through the lower consciousness, though it may caution avoidance of suffering that may already be known and may have been experienced too. The higher self knows the truth. The lower self can forget and expect different results from the same wrong thoughts, words, or actions taken. Remember that the lower self can make repeated mistakes leading to the same results. When a person is given the wrong knowledge, the wrong actions can be taken in ignorance. When the correct knowledge is given, the lower self can understand with the right knowledge and realizes the lower self's mistakes or wrongs. And it is only through one's own higher self or higher consciousness or Lord within each person's own heart that self-correction can take place. So awareness without identification of the body, mind, and intellect is the pure consciousness. He or she is the constant observer, supporter, and experiencer of one's life experience. This is why prayer or meditation is so useful, as that which is being worshipped or revered or focused upon is the same higher consciousness in each person's own heart. The intention to unite with this energy pushes aside personal attachment to the lower self. How does a person use this learning in their life? Most would not pursue any new knowledge without some goal or benefit from the learning. The benefit is for overcoming one's own limitations in life. Every limitation of human thinking and living. The application is for the improvement of each person. The person who knows the pure higher self consciousness, the gunas and their qualities, the changeable nature of the world, and the changeless and pure self, and knows this at all times and in all ways, this person is actively present and engaging in this world and is not subject to rebirth. Rebirth is caused by residual vasanas. When one has separated the higher and lower consciousness, he or she remains unpolluted so that he or she does not gather new vasanas from this world. Remember, in such a space, each experience is understood as relative and not the absolute reality. It is not something that one clings to in order to re-experience temporary joy or suffering. There is no attachment to such experience. Such a person engages in life with both caution and detachment. This adds no new vasanas. Some may feel, is only knowledge the way to reach such a space? Then we are reminded that many ways lead to the same goal of liberation or moksha or enlightenment. Knowledge can be used to reach this goal. Some knowledge is just gained and applied robotically from seeing or hearing a teaching. This is using logic with the application of the knowledge through repeating or sharing learned information. True knowledge uses knowledge in the application to one's experience. Independent thinking with knowledge can improve a way of doing something. Creativity comes from an intuitive application of the conventional knowledge that is experienced. New developments of thinking should also have a dispassion or detachment to the new application that one may participate in creating. This approach brings true, everlasting peace. More on this aspect is described in later chapters. Remember that to get to this same goal, which is liberation, moksha, or enlightenment, some reach it through the practice of meditation. This involves the alert silence with the withdrawal from one's focus from the mind and sense perceptions. Here, this lower self can discover the higher self within, and a union of the two can be experienced as well. Some may use the path of using discriminative knowledge to distinguish the lower self from the higher self through logic and experience. Some detach from the world for solitude in often a natural setting to experience this silent union. Others stay within the world to stay centered as living life within the guidelines of the knowledge gained and practiced. Finally, there are those that practice karma yoga for their good actions with full detachment from the results, yet this alone will be an indirect means to the goal to be reached. The actions taken are for the benefit of the world and for purity of the mind, for study, for meditation. Karma yoga can be an indirect method to also express love to higher consciousness. Devotional service that is associated with love for God or higher consciousness, combined with actions, can also reach the everlasting peace of union with the higher self. What about a person that has no interest in learning scriptural knowledge or to meditate or to love the higher consciousness? Those that are in this space have a path available to them, also guides Krishna. He says that these can get to the goal by listening to others' advice or teaching from a space of full trust and faith in speakers of wisdom. Most people fall into this group that will follow what another guides rather than independently doing or studying. Krishna assures that if this honestly and sincerely leads to worshiping higher consciousness mindfully, most easily by chanting his names, as in mantras for example, will be liberated from the continuous cycles of birth and death. Remember that teachers such as Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Moses, etc., All are seen as speakers of wisdom. Knowledge of this wisdom is available to all. Those that are able to realize the truth will get there through various paths, and all are acceptable to Krishna and through non-dual teachings that are available to each person. Remember that Krishna mentioned that this knowledge has been given or shared or expressed a long time ago, and that he is giving the same knowledge to Arjuna that has been shared since the beginning of the universe. Remember that the cycles of life occur in each life itself too. An infant's form dies and then becomes a child. A child dies to become an adult. A person dies to be reborn. Each day dies to be born into a new day. This can be seen in nature too. A seed dies to become a plant. A plant dies and becomes new seeds. Krishna reminds Arjuna that the entire world is created by the combination of matter and spirit. This is what creates the entire universe of moving objects, like humans, animals, planets, etc., and unmoving objects, like rocks, mountains, etc. Just as electricity cannot express itself without a bulb, the bulb cannot express without the electricity. The unique features of everything is inherent in matter itself, but is invoked by spirit within. What each person sees as variety in matter is based on the equipment used by the observer. Based on the equipment used, so will be the experience. Oneness is experienced by such a person who notices the variety between one form to another, yet knows or understands or becomes aware that everywhere, in all times and in all places, pure consciousness is the same. Arjuna learns in this chapter that matter alone is causing the perception of apparent differences among others and our own selves too. We can see our own bodies. There are various organs which each know their own role. We do not ask any organ to do their function as they already know what to do. This is the same as the functions of breathing, circulation, digestion, excretion, etc. Our minds do not direct these actions. What is doing it is spirit. This is the law set by higher consciousness. The same expression of higher consciousness is happening through each being. When an individual, in spite of seeing the varieties in creation, is able to see the connection that this is the same one, it is like understanding that many branches or fruit is coming from the same trunk of a tree. When followed from the roots, a person sees the same source for all. The root is the same as the branch and fruit coming from the same source. When this is understood and realized, an individual sees or understands or realizes Brahman or God or higher consciousness. We remember that even with so many activities happening in the body, each of us is one self. Each being is the microcosm that reflects the macrocosm of the universe. The next chapter elaborates on the equipment and the experience. Chapter 13, the Yoga of Field and its Knower, for the Healthcare Guru. Remember that ancient scripture, Vedic and even Greek, had mentioned that the whole of creation is composed of earth, water, fire, air, space. For those that have read such history, which sometimes is attributed to mythology, 4 or 5 elements have often been seen to be linked with creation. Through the Gita, we also learn more detail through the understanding of the body, mind, intellect, and the ego. All of this is referred to as inert and insentient matter. This means they cannot do anything without something other than their inherent nature. To make something sentient, it needs the higher nature or spirit by which the world is sustained. Matter does not exist independently. Non-matter in the nature of spirit is discussed in this chapter to remind us all that a special spark is needed to bring life to matter. We are reminded through this chapter about the nature of the lower self that is often thought of as the body, which is constantly changing and subject to death. Krishna begins with the body, that this is of the nature of the lower self because it is changing and subject to decay. Remember that we have also learned that the one who knows this is the knower. And let's not forget that body, according to the Gita and various historical texts like the Upanishads, includes the external or physical or gross body, the subtle internal body, which includes the five senses, the thoughts, desires, attitudes, behavior, feelings, and emotions, which is the mind, intellect, and ego. And finally, the causal body, which is even more subtle. Remember that vasanas is the term described as where ignorance is seated, which is composed of breath, digestion, and all of the subtle functions maintaining life, all of which are changeable, objective, and known. The one who is the knower of that truth is consciousness. Consciousness itself has no biases, no likes or dislikes, and no preferences, but allows the body, mind, and intellect to function based on the equipment that it flows through. So let us look at healthcare practice. We all know that two different people can learn the same information through education, even the same program and same class, yet each will be drawn to a unique aspect in their own practice. We can say this is due to their own accumulated vasanas or accumulated tendencies from past learning. If a person has experienced a loss through divorce or death, they may be drawn to work with grief or palliative care. If another has experiences with abuse or neglect, they may work on child protection or social work. Yet classmates may look at each other with surprise when they compare and contrast their own practices. Out in the workplace, we may see two professionals that have very different personalities while doing the same work. One may have a lazy style and another an enthusiastic or demanding style. This is felt by coworkers and clients alike. One person may be creatively driven to begin new ventures and another happy to keep things simple and stable. Now let's look at the values or virtues that have been strongly suggested in this chapter. These are humility, modesty, nonviolence, forgiveness, truthfulness, service to the teacher, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, freedom from sensual desires, absence of the false ego, awareness of the birth to death cycle, detachment from the comforts of family and home, even-mindedness through pleasant and unpleasant events, unwavering love or devotion to a higher consciousness or Lord, attraction to solitary place or time for personal contemplation and union with the divine energy, not needing crowds or crowd thinking, a dedication to self-realization and to the pursuit of truth. Whatever is opposite to these values was expressed by Krishna as being ignorance. Now, many may read the virtues or values list and feel good about one or most of the list, but there are some aspects that may make one question if this is just a clever way to push religious ideas on people. The union with the divine or higher consciousness may not be what many healthcare practitioners are seeking, and that is okay. For these souls, following some of the suggestions may just bring more peace to such minds for practicing healthcare with integrity and mindfulness. And each practitioner can benefit from such peaceful places from which to interact with patients or clients. Those that are looking for deeper connection are advised in this book to use this knowledge or prayer or meditation or karma yoga plus knowledge and meditation or sincere devotion or love to the service of higher consciousness, which we have learned by now is carried by each person. Those that are seeking a deeper or different union may actually experience this experience through regular practice of any combination of the means suggested. We can look at this chapter more generally and reflectively, however, to see that the suggestions are things that we would hope any person working with our own healthcare would bring to us. So how could we possibly not bring these things into our own practice? Yet many of us do not make a mindful effort to deliver many of these details into practice until we see or hear learn and experience how to do this. Let us look at just the first virtue of humility. Many of us really use the fact that we have had many years of education to bring confidence to our work. The confident healthcare practitioner does not need to feel like they must prove the years of learning. Of course, even legally, offices require the formal documentation of learning to be easily visible to clients. This does help to build trust between practitioner and client. Notice that nurses and home care professionals are only asked about this formal documentation upon interviews for hiring. Often, this does not bring these healthcare providers the respect earned by many other practitioners for the same or more years of practice in healthcare. Other practitioners may feel a feeding of their egos through their clients who are impressed by their learning. The risk here, of course, is that practitioners begin feeling that they, identified with their ego-based lower selves, are the ones doing the actual work. Humility requires that we always acknowledge the others involved in helping our patient outcomes, including other practitioners and our higher consciousness. How many healthcare practitioners pat themselves on the back for experiences that work out well and blame others for experiences with poor outcomes? I believe we can all remember at least one time that we have each done exactly this. We can look at modesty and realize that it may feel good to work in an affluent neighborhood, may feel good to drive a fancy car or live in an upscale home. And we can do all of these, but who do we credit for these things? We may even charge more for our services because we need to pay higher costs in particular neighborhoods. In looking at nonviolence, do we think or speak aggressively to clients or coworkers? Or do we take advantage of kindness by taking the office supplies home discreetly or charging associates higher rents than necessary? And for one more area to focus on to begin our personal self-reflection of ourselves from this chapter, let's look at forgiveness. Are we forgiving of others for any thoughts, words, or actions towards us that may not themselves demonstrate the values or virtues in this chapter? Are we forgiving of ourselves when we have thought, spoken, or acted out of line? This is not easy, but it is truly possible and incredibly freeing itself. This chapter is loaded with areas for self-reflection and self-improvement of each healthcare practitioner. We may all agree that the values are logical and make good sense. Now is the time to mindfully use these in the healthcare of those in our care, whether patients, friends, or family members. Remember that the ideas presented are not to be saved for a once-a-week practice like going to a church, temple, or mosque, maybe for some. This chapter is about consciously walking the walk that we truly do expect for ourselves and that every patient or client deserves from our service. This is a chapter, although most are in this book, that deserves reading and rereading and consciously understanding and practicing regularly. As Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. This is the compassionate, loving experience that healthcare providers are uniquely situated to help bring to each patient and personal experience. This chapter is also a great place to remember the oneness that connects the higher self to the higher self in all, whether animate or inanimate, sentient or insentient. Consciousness flows to and through all and is working through each person's unique equipment. It is easy to be sympathetic to those closest to us when we notice their thoughts, words, or actions are not from their best selves, as we love them, and that love often brings a spiritual blessing of forgiveness and understanding too. We can remember that each client or patient is carrying the same energy through equipment we may not understand, but which still deserves the best energy from us as healthcare providers. Sometimes this may take more effort, sometimes especially with friends or family. But the even-minded temperament that is being encouraged throughout this book and withdrawing from ego attachments does help immensely. The next chapter will help us understand our own personal equipment better so that we can appreciate our potential strengths and limitations and understand that people around us too, whether professionally or personally. The next chapter will help us understand our own personal equipment better so that we can appreciate our potential strengths and limitations and understand that of people around us too, whether professionally or personally. Let us truly understand ourselves and serve as the role models that those in our care truly deserve.